Hi guys, today we're going to do a pinch pot. This is the demo video for the pinch pot project. So here's my block of clay. Today you're going to need to have your clay. You're going to need to have something to score with. I'm using this to score with, just a sharp wood tool. Something to cut the clay off the block with, so I'm using tooth floss for that. And then you need your slip. And I also think it helps to have a little bit of water nearby. So like a little bowl of water might help. All right, I'm gonna cut the right size block off of here. Okay, so I have my cutting tool, but use whatever you have. This is what we're using to replace a wire. And I'm cutting more than I need because I want to start with something that's more of a block. So really, this gives me 4 attempts. Hopefully you don't need that much. And then I want a block about this size. So compared to my hands, it's just kind of a, it's not a very big amount. It's kind of a smaller amount of clay, but it's in a block form. Close your bag up because any air that your bag gets is going to dry it out and make it less usable for you. Okay, so I have my block here, and the first thing I need to do is to kind of hit out any corners or edges. So I start by just sort of smacking the clay into kind of a ball shape. We're after a sphere here to start. So once I get the edges out, I think the best way to kind of get it into a ball is to just I'm an angry pitcher and kind of smack it into my hand here. All right, so now I have a pretty nice sphere. So the sphere, it's pretty, pretty nice little ball shaped thing here. So this is another kind of way to sort of assess the size of clay. So now I'm going to take the ball in the palm of my hand here, and the opposite of where I'm holding it is where I want to do the opening, okay? So I might just test that out. I want it really even. I don't want it too far up or down or sideways. I want to make it as centered as I can. So that's pretty good. So I'm going to take my thumb and I'm going to stick it almost all the way down. Not through, but all the way down. And then I want you to kind of tune in to these little measures you have between your fingers. We use those with clay all the time, and this is a really good example. So I'm putting my thumb in there, and then I need to get about a ½ an inch from the bottom there. So the method to making a pinch pot is really squeeze and rotate. So I rotate it in my hand, and I squeeze between my thumb and my fingers that are on the outside. So you're looking at the very bottom of it right now. So all I'm doing right now is I'm going right along the bottom here. And I'm squeezing between my thumb and my fingers, thumb being inside, my fingers being outside, and I'm rotating. And I'm going all the way around, and I don't move from this part of the pot until I feel like it's really consistent, about a quarter to a ½ an inch thick, and it's consistent all the way around. So I'll rotate a few times before I'm satisfied, like, okay, I got that. Now I'm going to move up just a little bit up the side of the pot, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to try to get it, that squeeze, try to get it about the same thickness in this part of the pot here. And again, I'm going to rotate, keep rotating and squeezing until I feel like, okay, I got all of that, all of it's pretty consistent. And then I'm going to move up just a little more up the side. So here's my thumb, and I'm gonna squeeze there. So now I'm sort of near the middle. One thing I'm being really careful about is we have a tendency to pull out when we're trying to squeeze. So it's like more like that, and we don't want to do that. We want to have all our options open when we make this vessel. Like, you may want to open it up, but you may not. So you want to be very careful not to pull out and to leave this as closed or small as you can as you're constructing this. So I'm being real careful. That's just a turn, and I'm not pulling out at all at the top. All right, so I'm going around the side here. Again, just really making sure the consistency is good. I may even go back down a little and just make sure that that's all good. It's all blending in together really well. And then I can move up a little more. Again, keep rotating as you go. Squeeze, rotate until you get all the way up to the top. Okay, so if you see here, I'm developing a few cracks, and that happens really often when you're doing this. In fact, it happens to some people worse than other people. Some people just have warmer hands. I don't have particularly warm hands, but it's a warm day. So I would get my fingertips in that water I mentioned and just kind of wet them a little and then kind of go over those cracks, and that'll really help. You don't want a ton of water on it at this point, but a little bit of water is fine, and it just helps close up those cracks. You could also use a little bit of slip and then just kind of use your fingers to go over the top there, and that'll clean that up. So this is the basic vessel. I can go over this and go over it and make it, more and more consistent, but this is the basic vessel. Now what I do with it totally depends on my plan. Remember, we talked about all the different options. You can from here open up the lip and create more of a wide pot. Some people are talking about shells and flowers, and those are the things you'd want to open it up and then maybe add to it. So so that's where we're at right now. I need to think about my foot, like what I want to do. And hopefully before you start making this, you've already developed your plan. So you could move right away into your plan. So let's do the attaching the foot here. So you can do all kinds of feet or any kind of foot on this. I'm going to show you the one I made earlier today. Is sort of a weird contemporary looking foot. Now to do this, I had to make sure that these legs were strong enough to bear the weight of the pot before I put them together, before I sat them on those feet. So to do that, I had to dry out the pot a little to the point where it's leather hard. You do not want it to be super bone dry, but drying it a little bit increases the strength. So I did that first with the legs. I dried those out a little bit, and then I attached them, and then I dried the pot out. I let it sit out a little bit so that it got a little more strong. Now it can rest on those and safely. And I'm pulling this out so you can see there's no end to the kind of feet you might want to put on this pot or foot. So I'm just going to do a simple foot here. So I'm going to get a little bit more clay out, just a little, to work on the foot. So I'm going to do a simple coil foot. Again, you could do balls or long crazy feet like I did, or actually I've had people do feet that actually look like feet. So anything goes, but the pot needs to sit on that foot. All right, here is a reasonable sized coil, pretty consistent. So I want to attach that. So if I want to attach it to the very bottom here, I'm going to just get a sense of like how big I want that to be, and then I can cut it. I have a little butter knife here to cut, so I can cut that off. Now that looks like a pretty good size. So I want to score slip wiggle weld that on, always, always. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of stick it on a little and just test it. Like, is that how I want it to sit? you know, or do I want it a little off center? Maybe I don't like that. Maybe I want it a little bit off center. Kind of more interesting, right? So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to trace where I want it to go. So I know to score on the outside of that little sketch line I did. Okay, so now I am going to do some scoring in one direction here. And then I'm going to go in an opposite direction. And my point here is to really mess up the clay, really create some edges, okay? So make sure yours looks pretty messed up like that. Now I want to put this on, so to do that I have to also score the outside of this. And even if you're doing a flower or a shell or something like that, I would definitely do the foot first. It's really hard to do the foot when you can't really turn it over sideways or upside down. So now I'm going to dab some slip on. I want to make sure you dab it on and you don't brush it on, because if you brush it on, you're actually eliminating some of those little edges that you need to attach the other piece to. Okay, so that's pretty good. Now I'm going to turn over my foot here, and I'm going to do that third step, which is the wiggle. So I scored it first, I put slip on it, now I'm doing the little wiggle. All right, so now those edges have come together, and just to make sure they're together, I'm going to weld. I'm going to do that last part. And you could do this with anything. We talked about popsicle sticks and the ends of butter knives, and your fingers even work really well. But I want to kind of keep the round there, so I'm going to use a tool here that will kind of just grab the edge. So I'm trying to move the clay from one part into the other part, and it doesn't really matter which direction. I can move the pot into the foot or the foot into the pot, just as long as the clay from one part comes together with the clay from the other part. Okay, now I'm going to weld on the inside to make sure I have a nice cleanly attached piece. So the last thing I'm going to do with my foot is I'm just going to give it a little tap so that it sits nice and flat. Little tap. Now I'm going to let this sit out a little bit to get it a little bit drier so it's not going to completely smush down. And again, this is the method for whatever you are attaching to this. So definitely the foot. Also, if I was to attach any rope, any coil, any design, any texture, anything I was attaching to this, I would have to do it with the score, slip, wiggle, weld method. All right. So at this stage, I have a piece, and the rest of this is just my creativity. Most of what you want to do when it's leather hard. So if I'm trying to get this leather hard, I have three options. I can take this outside, where it's really warm right now. If it sat outside for 20-25 minutes, it would probably be leather hard. So I can work on it then a little easier. It's not going to like dent when I try to add things. The other way would be, probably the quickest way, is a hairdryer. Hairdryer in 3 or 4 minutes probably will get it leather hard where you need it to be. I definitely want the foot to be leather hard before I put it down on the foot, because it'll probably smush. The third way, which we do in class a lot, is we cover it loosely. So if I have my bag here and my piece, if I take whatever I'm going to store it on, and I put my piece down on that, covering it loosely means I just kind of go over the top, sort of loosely. There's ways for air to get in there, but not a bunch of air. So it's not going to completely dry out, but it is going to get a little bit drier and stronger. So please think about that. If you do this for a long time, depending on the environment it's in, it could dry out in 24 hours, plenty. So please make sure that if you do the loose covering technique, you check it the next day. And then if you don't want to get any more air into it, if you need to change the shape of it, or you want to keep it where it is after it gets leather hard, then you're really going to wrap it. So that method is more like this. put it in the bag and put the excess bag inside. And as I'm doing that, I'm trying to get as much air out as possible. So that's one way, or just tie it real close to the pot, you know, like this, and make sure as little air as possible gets in, and tie that. So that will keep it from getting overly dried out. And it'll keep it at the same place if that's what you're trying to do. While you're working on it, you want to stay leather hard. We're never drying these out. We never want them to get totally dry. You may choose to have this, make this permanent, and to do that, you would have to drop it off at school, and we'll talk more about that later. That process would be dropping it off at school, and then I'd give it back to you to paint, or I would glaze it at school and give it back to you. So we'll talk about that later. But even if you did that, you would give it to me leather hard, not ever bone dry, because it's too fragile to transport it to me. And I'll let it dry out at school, and then I'll fire it and give it back. All right, so that is the demo of the pinch pot. I'm giving you this video, it's Friday. On Wednesday, I need you guys to have your pinch pot and the foot attached, and to at least be beginning the process of putting the design together on this. If you mess up and you want to do another one, that's not a problem. Just make sure you save this clay. So if I don't want this, I'm going to put it in a bag like this, or a Tupperware container or something, with just a little bit of clay, a couple teaspoons. Eventually this will pick up that water, and then if I wedge it, I can use it for something else. We can't afford to waste any clay this year, so we have to make sure that we reuse clay. So you can use it for something else, and then grab another block of clay to make your pinch pot. All right, that's it for the pinch pot. Thanks for watching.